Nate had just recently taken over as manager of the office, yet he made the decision to change everything right now. Naturally, he started by reducing the salaries rather than increasing his own. Despite his extreme greed, he reduced the pay of nearly every employee. Numerous people turned in their resignation letters virtually the same day. The remaining people didn't mind leaving either, but they were compelled to put up with the tyrant's antics because they had no other immediate options. Now, about half of the workers had left. Nate clarified that some jobs were repetitious and pointless. The workload for those that stayed was doubled. They had to stay up late as a result. His antics occasionally even reached the caretaker woman, who quit because she wasn't getting paid much to start with. The main challenge at hand was locating a suitable substitute for her. Nobody wants to spend all day mopping floors and shining door handles for cents. Every day, Mrs. Bennett, the HR manager, made an effort to persuade Nate to increase the janitor's pay by a small amount. She contended that they would never hire someone for that type of money. Nate thus complained about how filthy and nasty the entire office was getting every morning during the staff meeting. Yes, by now the office was becoming really untidy. Everyone was in disbelief during one of these early morning meetings when Nate whined about everything that happened in the office. This division of the business was operating without a hitch. Nate reviewed the weekly reports before focusing on the issue with the caretaker post. He nearly yelled at the HR manager, "I'll have to include cleaning in your direct duties if you don't find a caretaker soon." She understood that finding a work at her age would not be simple, but she was prepared to flee from this crazy boss. She thus simply listened in silence to Nate's irrational approaches and demands whenever he brought them up, then used anxiety medications in her office to forget about it all later. The manager voiced his displeasure with Mrs. Bennett's work during the subsequent morning meeting, citing the fact that the caretaker was still missing. Nate walked slowly up to the window and furiously remarked, "Is it really that hard to find a cleaner? I mean, we're so successful that anybody would be willing to work in a stable company." He stopped glancing out the window and froze silently at one point. He appeared to be staring at the trash cans in the distance. A really ill-groomed woman was stacking cardboard boxes neatly. Nate broke into a cunning smile. "So you're saying no one wants to join our company for that pay, huh?" "Watch and learn, rookies." He turned to face Mrs. Bennett. He threw open the window wide. "Hey, come in for a minute. I've got an offer you might want to hear," Nate yelled. However, the girl calmly kept following the cardboards without pausing for even a moment in her task. Even though the employer was taken aback, he refused to back down. Even his eyes showed signs of enthusiasm. He yelled, "Hey, you need some cash. Get over here," once again. Still, the girl worked. The employer became a little angry by that and asked Mrs. Bennett to get him the security guard. Nate yelled at the security guard, "Get that woman by the dump over here ASAP," as soon as he burst into the conference room. The girl came into the office after a few minutes. It was evident after a few fruitless tries to communicate with her that she was totally deaf. She appeared to be using a hearing aid, but it didn't seem to be very good or expensive. The beggar appeared to be in his 30s. At close range, she was actually a really tidy girl. Her hair and clothes were clean, and so were her hands. Her face looked even younger and lighter because she wasn't wearing makeup. Her hair was collected in a knot after being carefully combed. Her clothes didn't exactly fit her, yet they still looked neat and worn out. It didn't smell, at least. The supervisor started speaking each phrase slowly, as if recalling that deaf people can read lips. The girl nodded and asked, "Do you understand what I am saying? Do you want a job? You do not have to do much. You'll just be cleaning the office," said the manager. For some minutes, the girl stayed motionless and observed her surroundings. Then she gave a nod of consent, and Nate stood up triumphantly. He felt so pleased with himself. He turned to face Mrs. Bennet, who was observing the proceedings in silence. But when he saw Mrs. Bennet's expression, he realized he was pushing it down too much, and even the homeless girl would run away for that kind of pay. Can't find a cleaning lady? Perhaps you just forgot how to hire people. Well, here's a lesson for you. That worthless piece of crap was ready even for a smaller salary. By the way, before you announce it to her, think about cutting it down a little bit, maybe. He thus abandoned the notion. The girl who was deaf went to work. Lauren was her name, and she consistently arrived at work promptly, often even before the official workday began. She carefully cleaned, wiped, and scrubbed everything she came across. After a week, the office was completely changed. However, that did not change the team's sentiment towards the deaf coworker, who was frequently the subject of offensive and taunting remarks. Knowing that she couldn't hear them, her coworkers would make fun of her behind her back and laugh hysterically. Even with her outdated and poor quality hearing aid, the girl was still able to hear some of the unpleasant things that people had said about her and her work. She had endured a lot in life and was able to keep her cool in spite of the persistent pestering. She lived in an old, abandoned hut on the outside of town, and she always looked forward to coming home after work to her calm place. Lauren had taken in several stray animals into her modest home, including 2 dogs, 3 kittens, a cat, and a parrot with a damaged paw, so she was not alone in it. She was prepared to put up with the jokes and derision at work in order to support these creatures, which were her constant friends. She found solace and affection in her pets, and their company enabled her to manage the everyday mistreatment she endured at work. Even though she might have only bred and watered herself at night, she always made sure to have something tasty for her animal pals because their adoring looks could easily make up for a difficult day's job. Mrs. Bennet was quite happy with the cleaning lady, even if her coworkers still made fun of her behind her back for keeping the workplace spotless through her hard work. Nate, the manager, was still dissatisfied with her efforts. Though he was never exactly sure what he wanted from her, the girl's quiet disposition and perceptive gaze eventually won her the admiration of her coworkers. Even many who had mocked Lauren in the past started to see that her past was more complicated than they had initially believed. She was literate and well-spoken for a beggar. Her speech was succinct but perceptive. Her coworkers were frequently surprised by her astute and thought-provoking comments, which gave the impression that she was well-versed in a variety of subjects, but had chosen not to share them. They realized that her existing circumstances had nothing to do with her ability or skill. The boss, Nate, had started acting aggressively at the meetings every morning, which had made the atmosphere at the office tight and stressful. He gave the impression that the company's performance, which had started to drastically fall, was the fault of others. This drop in productivity led to the employer, who had grown resentful, often terminating staff members, frequently doing so all at once. This served only to heighten the mood of distrust and negativity among the remaining staff members. Coworkers were spreading rumors that the boss, Nate, would soon be the last person remaining in the office. Nolan, the CEO and owner of the business, had started coming more often, probably as a result of the branch's unexpected drop in earnings. But Nate would take advantage of this to threaten and coerce the staff into projecting a favorable impression of Nolan while he was there. Nolan, who had started the business from the bottom up, was not going to let it fail in spite of Nate's efforts, and would take action to turn things around. Nolan noticed that although the office seemed to be operating smoothly on the outside, there was a feeling of disquiet among the staff after making multiple visits to what had once been one of his successful branches. Upon another visit, Nolan declared that the manager and all other staff would receive a paid day off, while the company underwent a comprehensive cleaning procedure. Pay would still be made to those who declined. Nolan had wired his own computer to covertly install cameras across the office while everyone was gone. In order to save the company he had laboriously constructed, he wanted to find out the truth about what was actually going on in the office and take appropriate action. Every day from the moment the office opened until it closed, Nolan committed himself to keeping an eye on things. He painstakingly collected data and proof to comprehend the causes of the branch's downfall. Nolan was taken aback when he was shown a polished corporate growth plan in a meeting one day. He skimmed the text quickly and looked surprised up at Nate. With the business strategy in hand, Nolan questioned, "What is this?" Nolan was clearly interested in the content, so Nate, lowering his gaze somewhat, said, "I worked very hard on it, sir. I didn't sleep for several nights. I really hope you like it." The tidy feminine penmanship was the first thing that confused Nolan. He knew Nate's scribbled handwriting from having read several of his reports. More research revealed to him that Nate's thoughts were just as chaotic and complicated as his handwriting. When Nolan watched the taped footage, he was astounded to see that the cleaning lady had been working on the documents well into the night. She wasn't even aware of the passing of time because she was so absorbed in her task and fully focused. Additionally, she possessed the ease of creating graphs and diagrams as if she had been doing it for years. That he had missed so much at his branch infuriated Nolan. Nate was called into Nolan's office early the following morning. He charged in, but he stopped dead in his tracks when he saw the look on Nolan's face. He just stood there and stared at the floor while Nolan reprimanded him. Fearing the boss's anger, nobody in the workplace dared to move or talk. Nolan said angrily, "Do you realize that your deceit and deception nearly destroyed the branch? I am just astounded at the number of high-class employees I've lost due to your arrogant behavior. You fired all of the best workers that I've been working hard to handpick for so long." Nate hesitated. "Nolan, let me explain." "I don't need your explanation." I was like, okay, Nate's probably testing some kind of technique. But when you attempted to take credit for someone else's work, that was the last straw. As he started to head for the exit, the once confident manager looked deflated and lost color in his face. Nolan calmed himself and stated, "You have 10 minutes to get your stuff and leave." He heard Nolan instruct his secretary to bring in the cleaning lady, a young deaf woman named Lauren, at that precise moment. Lauren walked discreetly into the office, and Nolan motioned for her to take a seat. "Please take a seat. I want to know more about you. Obviously, you're intelligent and have not been disadvantaged all your life," Nolan said as they talked. With some confusion, the girl acknowledged that this was indeed the case. Nolan realized that although she was deaf, she was not stupid as she began to communicate. She started to tell her narrative, speaking softly as she peered out the window. Despite coming from a very low-income background, Lauren loved learning new things from an early age. She put a lot of effort into her studies, even though she lived in a challenging environment where her parents would quarrel and drink excessively at night. She studied at an abandoned house close to her flat on days when her parents were drinking from the 3rd grade till she finished. When her family was still asleep, she would steal back home in the morning, stuff her rucksack with clothes, and dash out to school. Lauren thrived academically despite her rough upbringing and had no trouble being admitted into a business school. All of her professors admired her since she was a focused and intelligent student. She was always happy to help her peers and had a natural ability to pick up topics fast. Nobody was shocked to learn that Lauren had the highest GPA upon graduation. Her favorite topic and her lifelong goal was business administration, That's where she met Connor, her first love, who was a year older. They knew they were in love the moment they laid eyes on one another in the east hallway of the institution. But Connor's affluent family wasn't fond of their union, especially because their son was going to marry a bright but underprivileged woman. In spite of this, Connor proposed to Lauren, saying he wanted to live out the rest of his days with her because their love was so intense. One day, Lauren traveled to see her friends outside of the city with her fiancé, Connor. Given that they were being married in a week, they were in a great mood. A thick fog suddenly rolled in as they neared their friend's country home, where everyone was waiting for them. All around them was blurry and white. The headlights of an approaching car flashed directly into their windscreen, and they were completely unaware of it. An accident and a horrendous squeal of brakes. Lauren was in an ambulance when she became conscious again. Lauren inquired about her fiancé's well-being right away. When she found out he was dead, she passed out. Lauren knew right away that her life had altered when she woke up in the hospital room. She went deaf right after that. The rapid loss of hearing was unexplained by the doctors, who blamed stress for it. She begged the physicians to let her go to her lover's burial, despite her hearing loss and unstable mental state. But they refused, even denying her access to his cemetery. Connor's parents accused her of causing the accident and stated that she wouldn't have gone to the country house if it weren't for her and her broken pals. At the conclusion, Connor's mother practically snarled, "I will make her life miserable. You can only get a job as a caretaker at best. You will cry, regretting that you ruined my son," as she nearly lunged at her with her fists. The poor girl's sole regret at that point was that she didn't pass away instead of Connor. Ultimately, she wasn't required by anyone. When she went on drinking binges with one of her roommates, her mother quickly switched housemates and succeeded in setting their house on fire. She had no career, no house, no love, and now she had no hearing in her life. Finding a job was unfeasible as no one would hire a weak deaf beggar. She taught herself how to read lips at first. She eventually succeeded in earning some additional cash by cleaning at the nearby market. She bought an inexpensive hearing aid with that money. She could still hear some words, but her hearing wasn't fully restored. She just started to walk about after that. She discovered a tiny hut where she could hide. She had witnessed so much injustice that she never lamented her life, even in spite of her challenging circumstances. Her closest friends were her pets, and she was happy with them. The only issue was that because the room in the abandoned house was unheated, her pets would freeze when the weather became cold. She was concerned about her pet's welfare even then. Nolan listened to her depressing tale while sitting silently. She thought back to the terrible incident that included Connor at the conclusion of the story. He was upset by what had transpired and knew his wealthy parents. When Lauren, a highly qualified business graduate, accepted his offer to take over as the branch's new executive director that same day, he was thrilled with the choice. The branch quickly got better. Nolan was often spotted dropping Lauren off at work, and on occasion he was even observed visiting the branch. Everyone finally found out that they were dating, and eventually everyone found out that they were married. Nolan gave her the ideal present. He stopped by the branch one day after lunch. He knocked on Lauren's office door, and upon entering, he found her engrossed as usual. "Honey, take a break, will ya? I got you something." There was a document in his hands proving she was the proprietor of an animal refuge where all her dogs lived. She would not have time to care for them in the near future while she and her spouse moved into their new house. She was also eagerly getting ready for the arrival of a baby boy on top of everything. Nolan was ecstatic to hear the news. Lauren experienced one more miracle that even medical professionals were unable to explain. She miraculously regained her hearing, which allowed her to function normally. The businessman's vast, expansive home was suddenly filled with the coziness and comfort of a home. What do you think of the plot and the characters? How would you approach the situation differently? Talk about your ideas. They might be useful to someone going through a tough moment. Please think about liking and subscribing for more stuff if you liked this story. Press the button for the notification bell. We are grateful and hope to see you soon.